and we'll start the webinar. All right, well, as people are logging in, I'd like to welcome everybody as you're coming in. You'll see a video playing that is providing some background on our panelists tonight. It'll tell you a little bit about their stories and their background and the things that are important to them when it comes to foster care, so that when we start our discussion, we won't waste time doing bios and background. We're just going to jump right in. At America's Kids Belong, our mission is to dramatically improve the experiences and the outcomes for kids in foster care. This event is part of fulfilling that mission because we're working to inspire, engage, and educate people like you to consider fostering and to help close the large gap between the number of kids in foster care and the number of licensed foster homes. I'd like to share a few housekeeping items as we get started tonight. First, please take a moment to review the panel scrolling so that you'll know a little bit about our panelists. We are recording tonight's discussion and it will be shared on social media and other public platforms. It also will be available on demand and we'll email it to you as one of our attendees. We did review and appreciated all of the questions that you submitted when you registered. We have some of those that we'll be addressing in our Q&A and just throughout the discussion, but if our other questions come up for you, there's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to submit questions as they come up during tonight's discussion. We also will be conducting a handful of quick polls, and we hope that you'll take a moment just to respond to those as you see them pop up on your screen. We'll keep them open for about a minute each. I encourage you to check our homepage at americaskidsbelong.org for upcoming panel events. We have more events scheduled throughout this fall that all address foster care related issues, but have a little bit different angle. And we think that there's great learning to be had just as somebody who cares about this issue, as well as just advancing your own knowledge and thoughts about fostering. We have three more upcoming events scheduled so far, but we'll have more coming out. And lastly, we will be sending an email following this program that'll have a link to helpful resources, a link to this recording on demand so that you have the opportunity to watch it again or share it with your friends. And that kind of wraps up our housekeeping. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Redd. She is State Director of our Colorado Kids Belong chapter. She's also an adoptive and foster mom, and she's going to be coordinating our conversation tonight. So Tracy, you ready to get started?
Yeah, thanks, Nanette. Hello, everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us as tonight we talk about fostering, everything from getting licensed to accepting your first placement and probably some other things that'll come up. So we're glad that you joined us, and we have an awesome group of panelists here with us tonight. As you saw their introductions a little bit, but I'm going to point out Britt Kelly is here in Colorado and works on my team with me, and she's a former foster youth giveaway. Britt, I mean, they can see your names, but still. And then we have Terry in South Dakota. He's a foster dad. And Tiffany She is in Tennessee, and she has worked in child welfare and is on our Tennessee Kids Belong team, has also been a foster parent. And then John and Heidi are in South Carolina, and they're foster parents. And Cheyenne is an adoptee and a foster parent. So we are going to dive into these questions. And like she said, if you have more questions you think of, go ahead and throw those in the chat. And Nanette will help us work through those at the end. All right, guys, let's see. So Tiffany, let's start with you. Would you kind of briefly explain, go over the licensing process and include the home study part too?
Yeah, of course. So licensing and including home study and training is very unique for every state, but in general, there is typically a pre-service training process, and that is the education. It provides an overview of really what it takes to be a foster parent, typically dives deep into some of the training curriculum that's tied with trauma and culture and just some of the details of how to work in this child welfare system. And so the education besides in the training typically has a concurrent process of home study interviews. And so you might have a foster parent trainer, and you might also have a home study writer. That person could be the same. You could have multiple folks in your home. But the home study process is really just an in-depth interview process. And I say it's intrusive, and sometimes it's invasive. Questions about history of relationship, social well-being, reference checks, medicals, home safety walkthrough. So walking through the home and assessing safety and risk factors for bringing in children of any age. And that is unique to different policies and procedures within the state, and also agency providers. And so the overview and high level of that is it's very unique, but it is timely, and it is invasive, and it is intrusive, but it is overall assessing the safety and the suitability of your home and your family to meet the needs of the children that are in custody or the children that could potentially come into your home. So vetting process, it takes time because they want to make sure that they are assessing the home well. More than one visit, can't get to really know someone just by one conversation. So understand there might be multiple. They may be virtual, they may be in person. But again, it's very unique and based on policies and procedures and guidelines within their state.
Yeah. I'm sure we have people, I think, from more than 30 states on here tonight. So it's a little bit different across the country in different places. But what would you say the average time frame would be from first, going to an orientation or something like that to actually getting certified? What's the average?
I think most states really want to do it well. And so the home study and the training process is anywhere from 3 to 5 months, depending on how that curriculum and the timeliness of collection of verification and documents. I will say in Tennessee, we are a 60 to 90 day state, trying to just meet the need, but also making sure that we are adhering to those standards. But I'd say 3 months, 90 days is a safe bet. Just understand additional documentation, additional questions, or maybe it's a marriage license that you have to order because you can't find it. So it could take a little bit of time to get some of that documentation, or just to iron out some of the things that come through when you're working in a training and a home study process. So
yeah, that's great. I also know I'm personally currently getting certified, filling out all the paperwork and stuff, and asking about financial statements and stuff. And I've had people, when I've been doing recruitment and stuff, ask, why in the heck do they need to know our financial status and how much income we have and all that? And I sometimes boil it down for all of that, like all the different crazy things that feel intrusive, is that they want to see how much margin you have in your life and how much stress or pressure you already have if they're going to add extra stuff, extra relationships, kids in your home, do you have enough margin in your life, emotionally, physically, financially, all the things, because they want you to be able to handle the new things
Absolutely.
that are coming your way. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's helpful to know when you start to feel like it's intrusive. You're like, okay, they're trying to see if I'm ready to take all this on. Yeah, for
And I
sure.
will point out too, everybody has strengths and opportunities to grow. And so, don't be scared of some of the things that maybe caused you to grow in your season and in your life. But just recognize there are some like no-goes. There are some black and white things like background checks and things like that. But there may be an area where some extra support or maybe a suggested training can better equip you in the pre-service process. So during that training process, before you get or receive a child into your home. So, that the hope is, and when we go into homes as child welfare, we want it to work. We want more families. And so we are going to advocate and try to get you to that point as much as possible. But we're also vetting because we care about the safety of those children.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. So this one's for any and all of you. How can you best prepare to be a foster parent? Everything from personal stuff, work, marriage, family, your routines, your finances. What are some thoughts that you have about how people can best prepare to be a foster parent?
Budgeting time would be the big one for me, being a single foster dad. The obviously I didn't realize how much time it took and the amount of I guess time budgeting, between a job and having a child or more than one child in the home, bring him to school, pick him up from school, counseling appointments, things like that. So just being prepared with knowing you have the time is super important.
That's good. What else?
I would start building your village. So for me, that looked like finding out the foster parents in my area. So for me, I was a single foster parent. So I looked for another single foster parent who was in the game, doing it well, to just come alongside of her and do life with her while also helping with the kids. So I learned a lot from her and received a lot of support while building my village and learning. And also standing in the gap because you're helping her with the children.
That's great. Heidi and
I
John?
would say that if you have anything that from your past that may be triggered by bringing a child into your home, it's so important for you to do your self work before you take in a child that may be experiencing a lot of emotions and has a trauma that they need to heal from. If you could take care of yourself, making sure that you are mentally, physically equipped to taking on that responsibility. And if you have any personal trauma, to get that healed and work on healing prior to bringing a child into your home.
Yeah. Oh, you're muted, guys. I can't hear you. Try again. Uh-oh. Something went wrong. I'll go while you guys just interrupt me when you get yours figured out, okay? I would say all of that, and it fits with what I said earlier about the pressure in your life, like just figuring out if you need a village, if you need to figure out time management stuff, your money, your past traumas, like it's creating that margin. Or sometimes it's like you get your feet wet, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I need to figure some of these things out. So knowing who your go-to people are that can definitely help point you in the right direction to start to work out some of those things. Having a person that can be my confidant has been super important to me as well. That person that I can be like, I'm about to flip my own lid. I need to talk kind of thing. Yeah.
Can you hear us now?
Yes. Yay. Okay.
I don't know what that was. I was going to mention if you have your own kids, having a conversation with your kids about what foster care is and what it's going to look like, because they're going to have a totally different experience, a foster care experience than you are, because they're going to interact, especially if the kids are around the same age. They're going to interact differently. Kids are comfortable talking with other kids a lot more than other adults, so they may hear things that they aren't used to hearing, and stuff like that. And even so we have a 2-year-old little girl that we adopted earlier this year, and she's having a hard time sharing because she never had to share her toys before, but she has to share with the kids in our that we have now. So just being at least in tune with your own kids, whether they're biological or adopted, and kind of preparing them for. I don't know if you could hear that, but they're being loud up.
No, we do.
But it's loud giggles. It's loud giggles, so we'll take it. Just being in tune and making sure that there's open communication with your bio kids.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Anything you want to add, Tiffany?
I don't know if we want to phase into this, but I'd just piggyback off of what Cheyenne mentioned as far as building your support system now. I think it's very important to not just think about the people that can give you emotional support, but tangible support, physical support. So thinking through that support system and having that conversation now of what it's going to look like for you. And as you're going through training, things that you're learning, things that you're going through as far as the home study process, having that confidant that you mentioned, Tracy, having somebody that is going to champion you and support you. I always say you need a balcony person. You need somebody that's going to say, yes, yes, keep going, keep going. But you're also going to need somebody to say, gosh, that sounds really tough. That's hard. Or I can't believe that they need that document from you. But just keep pushing through and keep persevering. And so, but building that support system now, and the greater number, the better. And like Cheyenne said, if you're not connected with anybody that's fostering, or you don't know a foster or adoptive parent, start plugging into those communities. There's many virtually, there's many online, there's in-person ones, but just really working towards building that support system. And I kind of think foster care and adoption is that, what is that, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
Once you start talking about it, you're going to know somebody that is connected to it, and you're going to be able to really start sharing stories and really find those people, find your tribe.
That's great. That's great. I think also in that it's figuring out the people that are already your circle, your parents, your spouse's parents, your brothers and sisters, your neighbors, helping them be aware of what it is that you're doing. Like literally for us, we had to tell our neighbors, by the way, there's a new teenager moving in, just in case you see something, like he's not breaking in, he belongs here, kind of thing, letting them know that there's a new kid on the block, kind of thing. So thinking of that too, of they might not be your support circle, but they need to be informed, and maybe a little bit of trauma sensitivity so that they can understand well what's going on and stuff like that. That's great. I would love to hear from Tiffany and Cheyenne. Let's talk about what wrap support is and when you should start building that support. You already touched on that, but you guys dive into what that has looked like for you all in Tennessee.
Cheyenne, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So if you are church affiliated, I would suggest you start sharing with your church family, or if you're not church affiliated, start building your connections. So for me, with my rep team, so many. So Memphis is insanely huge, and there's tons of foster families. So we have many things like Foster Village Memphis. So there's a lot of other foster villages in your area. So that looks like as soon as you get a call, you put in a form, and within 24 hours, you receive a huge welcome bag full of everything you'll need within 24 hours. My rep team looked like I had a lot of other single foster parent, or not even single. I had a lot of foster parent friends that I have bonded with and spent time with before I was a foster parent. So I knew their family, their children knew me. I would do little girls' hair and still do little girls' hair in foster care. So just building those connections. I had some people in my RAP team, they would create a whole meal train for about 2 weeks out. I would have food at my door. I remember one night I had a teen come in at 11 o'clock at night, and she had nothing, and I had people at my doorstep at midnight just dropping off food, even if they're not coming in, they're just knocking and leaving something tangible like that. Because I've did so many teen girls, like I had a huge supply closet full of soaps and razors and all the things that I would keep in my closet. So for people that didn't want to be face to face with foster children, they were able to support financially. And also just putting yourself out there, and because so many people want to help, but I know with me, in the beginning, I would feel like a burden. I felt like, oh, people know that I'm getting these small board payments from the state, but that doesn't cover hardly anything, because I would have teen girls or little girls with their hair not done. So that's me going to the beauty supply store to get braiding hair. And one of my other foster teens, I would have her do her hair. So all of that, and that's pricey. I hope I answered something.
Yeah, it's great. I can piggyback off of that. So RAP is it's wrapping around families, and so it's very unique in the sense that it's a model that AKB, America's Kids Belong, shares with the community. It is one of the models that typically goes into the faith community, but it is not just limited to faith. It is a model that it's an acronym. So it's words of encouragement, respite or relief care, acts of service, and prayer. And so the concept, though, is really it's that support system. Like Cheyenne said, many people want to help. They just don't know what to do. And so it kind of gives a framework that says, when a foster parent is receiving a child, the last thing that they need or should be doing is going out and buying pajamas or looking to see if we have a toothbrush. They need to be establishing that safety, that felt safety, that connection, receiving a child in the hardest moment, and really making that connection and building rapport. And so RAP gives that time for foster families to do that, and that support system then can come and rally and say, we'll show up with a welcome basket, we'll show up with a meal train, we'll show up with words of encouragement, or a text message that says, as you are navigating hard things with kids that come from trauma, we're gonna be praying for you, or we're gonna be showing up. And so it just gives a little bit of a unique resources of the community to meet the needs of families in care, with the idea of bolstering up foster families and keeping them in a place where they don't feel like they're drowning on the other stuff, and that they can really focus on being healers and supporters of children in care.
Yeah. Would you give a definition of felt safety? Like, help everybody that's watching know what that means?
So I'm probably not the best to answer this, but it's just it's allowing a child to really feel secure and safe in where they are in the moment of foster care, or in your home, or in the relationship with you. Would you add more to that?
No, I think it's just knowing that sometimes kids that have experienced neglect, abuse, or even just the stepping into foster care, into a new home, you're like, you are safe, but that doesn't mean they feel safe. So it's a lot of work on the foster parents, not just when kids first move in, but especially when they first move in, of really helping. My husband and I were just talking about it last night, of that repetition of sometimes the same things over and over that helps them like actually get it internally, like, oh, I'm safe. And then sometimes you still get surprised a while down the road of like something happened and they didn't feel safe again. So just, I think that is an important space to point out of encouraging your community to lean in and support, signing up for a RAP team, or just like asking your friends and family, like, hey, especially when I get a new placement in my home, will you step up? And here's the 3 things that would be most helpful to me, so that I can focus my energy on these kids and not figuring out where to get clothes from or meals or whatever, but I need you to help. Or sometimes it's the ongoing, like, I need help with transportation. My parents have helped me out a lot this week, actually. Like those people that just step in and help out with driving or whatever it might be. And just to point out that if some of you out there watching want to build a RAP team or to ask your church to get involved in doing that or something, we have resources, so you can reach out to us and we can kind of give you some materials or coach you on how to do that. And I think it is both. It can sometimes be this organized system that a church or a school does, but sometimes it can also just be me saying, like my sister-in-law, she's like, I have my people and I just tell them, hey, next time we get a placement, this is probably what would be helpful. And they lean in and they go to Costco and they buy a bunch of stuff and drop it off on my doorstep or whatever it would be. So both ends of the spectrum work, and it's building your team. And that was awesome to hear from you, ladies. Thanks for sharing that, for sure. So kind of leaning off of that a little bit, maybe, of felt safety and understanding what it's like to be a kid in foster care. Britt, we would love to hear from you as a former youth in foster care. What is it like to be removed from your home and placed in a foster home? Can you describe a little bit of that to help us understand when a child's moving into our home, what might be going on for them?
Yeah, when I think of the concept of what it's like entering foster care and think back to my own experience, in a word, I would say it's overwhelming. You're immediately put into a home of people that you sometimes is of people that you don't know if you're going into a foster home. Sometimes you're lucky enough to go to a kinship home where you'd have some familiarity, but yeah, it's very overwhelming. Everything from the smell of the house being different, maybe the feel of the sheets, to the new people, their personalities. When you come from abuse, trauma, and neglect, you learn how to kind of read people. And so you're trying to figure out with the foster parents, like, what do they want? What do they want from me? How can I fit in this place? And so there's this level of just trying to survive. Even when you enter into foster care, you're removed from that position where you experienced abuse and neglect, but you are still in that survival mode. There's trauma that you experience when you enter into a new home. There may be kids in the home, and so you're trying to build relationships with them, or different foods. So a lot of small things that can just lead to a lot of small things at once being overwhelming. Personally, for me, in the town I lived in, there weren't any foster parents available to bring me into their home. So I had to go outside of the town I was in. And so that meant a change of routine for me. I had 45-minute drive to get to school. So change in routine, I woke up super early to get there. And then there's the question of, can I still go to my same school? Am I going to be able to do the extracurricular activities that I was doing? And so all these things go through the heads of these children and youth when they enter foster care. There's so much unknown. So yeah, I mean, I think overwhelming just really sums it up, because of the change in routine, not knowing what's going on, and just trying to adjust.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. So kind of on the other side of that, what did it feel like to welcome the first child that came into your home, or children that came into your home as a new foster parent? So this would be for John and Heidi, or Cheyenne, or Terry. Any of you, go ahead and share what that felt like. Can't hear you. Terry, you go while
Do
they.
you want me to go? Yeah, that's fine. The nerve-wracking for sure for the first child. Not knowing basically what you're doing, I guess, especially if you haven't had biological children, and so it's the first time being a parent. And so nerve-wracking. You kind of cycle back in your head what you learned in the training, and especially depending on what the child's been through, and any type of trauma training you've had. The but I guess realizing that they're just as nervous as you are is important. Um, they're just as scared as you are. Things like that are important to know for your first placement and every placement after that. I don't know if it gets easier because every child's different. So you're going to have that little bit of anxiousness and nerves. The first one's a little more challenging because you don't know the system. You don't know exactly how things work. If you need help with this, who do you call? Things like that. So it gets easier definitely as it goes, but you're still every placement you're going to have that little bit of anxiety with it.
Yeah. No.
I can. Oh, okay.
Go
So
ahead.
my first foster placement. Well, technically, the first one was a 17-year-old girl who I should have said no to, but it was an experience. So I welcomed her for 3 days. So I also did something like emergency placement care. So that's kind of like, let's say a child is going somewhere else the next week. So I would have them for the weekend or something similar to that situation. So it was in the middle of a snowstorm, and I welcomed her, and she had a lot of behavior issues that were hard, and I felt very ill-equipped. But my next one was shortly after her, probably 4 days after her, I had a 2-year-old little boy who came to me delivered by police officers in the middle of a snowstorm because DCS couldn't get out, and he had sat at the police precinct all day long, and I had nothing but little girl pajamas. So I put him in little girl pajamas, and some of my wraparound team had husbands with big trucks that could get through the snow. So I had loads of stuff at my door and food in the middle of a snowstorm while DJ was while he was wearing his girl pajamas. So it was really sweet.
It's not.
Sweet. Thanks for sharing. Okay, John and Heidi.
Wonderful build up. I would say that every placement, so we have had a couple where we've closed our home and then started again for different reasons through adoptions and stuff like that, moving. And every time we get our first placement with that license, it's the same feelings like we haven't done it before. And even this time recently when we started fostering again, we got a call and we were like, okay, we have to, and really it's, sometimes you are feel just as scared or nervous as, some of the children that are coming in. And I would say that is okay. Obviously, we don't show that to them, but it's okay that like you don't know. So I think we've had, like Cheyenne was saying, some that are brand new to foster care completely, and some that have been in and out of the system, and they want a clean slate. So the feeling of like saying like there's not putting anything on them. Oh, we heard this was happening about. You don't address those things, and you're able to just acquaint them with your home and the people in your home through all of your nerves, because you're both nervous. And so just taking the first step in that.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. I think of also, I heard this in training, and then one time we took in a kinship placement of a little guy, and food, and just figuring out how to keep food on hand that would be familiar to likely, and and it's okay. Like, instead of being like, we're going to eat clean, like, sure, maybe later, but for now, comfort food is okay. And I ended up doing a food basket on the counter. Actually, I did two. One was more like protein types. I mean, they're still snacks, but they were at least like beef sticks and things. And the other was more like sweeter things. And I was like, if you want something out of this basket, you have to take something out of this basket too, but you can have something anytime you want. You just have to have one from both at least. And that worked well. Like, at least he was only with us for a while. So it was a good way to ease into that part of things instead of just the constant asking and stuff. He could just take what he felt like he needed. And actually he also, I've heard this for lots of kids, with food insecurities, wanting food in their room at night. And instead of making it like, no, you can't take food to your room, I just had a spot like, okay, on this shelf, you can set a granola, you can have like two things up here. And that way they weren't hiding food. And I mean, maybe they still were, and I just didn't know it, but, but I don't think they ever ate the food that was there, but it was just them knowing that I have something right there if I need it, type of thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Did anybody think of anything else they wanted to share on that topic of inviting or welcoming a kid into your home?
I think it's important never to assume that they're going to know when you're asking them questions what you're meaning. So questions like, do you like pizza? They may never have had pizza. Or do you like spaghetti? They may never have had spaghetti, or their spaghetti looked different than your spaghetti. And so a great opportunity is going to the grocery store and allowing them to show you maybe what was one meal that they really, really looked forward to when they were in their previous home, or, things like that. So, Chris, did you have anything to add?
Good. Yeah. That's good. I also think of, Terry mentioned, like that first time, you don't even realize all the answers to the questions or all the pieces of the puzzle that are outside of just tucking a kid in at night and feeding them. There's all the other appointments and all of that. And it's interesting how once you get a few under your belt, those things become familiar to you. And I like to point out to people, like, the longer you do it, the more your capacity could probably increase, because those things become like common language to you instead of the first time when you're like, wait, what am I supposed to do? What? So just keep at it and know that you will increase your understanding, and therefore you'll be able to do an even better job and possibly increase your capacity from what you first thought. When my husband and I were first going through foster parent training, I remember one night driving home and saying, I think that we would need to foster littles, like 2 years old and under, because I can't imagine bonding with older kids. Like, it just, whatever we had talked about that night at class just had me thinking about that. And that's not at all how our story went. But my thought at first was like, that's my capacity. That's what I need to do. And then through actually what Cheyenne mentioned earlier about like serving other families that we're fostering, my mind and my perspective opened up to a different space. Our first placement was a almost 15-year-old boy. So 6 foot tall, not at all like a little 2-year-old. Yep. So with that, how about this one is for the Sampsons and Terry. What advice would you give to new foster parents about how to best help transition each new placement in your home, like that transition season? What thoughts?
Thanks, Mel.
There you go. I can hear you.
I was asleep or something. I don't know. Okay, so I would say I'm a very practical person, and we have had like 1 to 7 kids in our home. And on a practical level, when you add more kids to your home, it's just anticipating some of the times of chaos. Like, sometimes it is going to, it's going to be chaotic, but sometimes there's not a way to not make it less chaotic, but you can still make it feel calm. So we put signs up like everywhere. And it doesn't, just like on the fridge or how to do laundry, just a 1, 2, 3 step, so that we have kids, when we're promoting some of those independent skills, or they've had to do it for all their siblings before, but our washer works different, or things like that. Like, you just put those on there. We have a chore list. So, obviously the first day we don't say, these are your chores, but in that we're able to say, you can look at this. They have them in their bedroom, how to clean your room. making sure there's nothing on the floor and making sure your laundry's in the basket. Things that, again, like, I think Tiffany was saying, you don't assume that they
Yeah.
know how to do something. So
Your
signs,
standard is. I like that. Like, here's what a clean room looks like. Cause you might say clean your room and they
Right.
have their assumption of what that means. Yeah, that's great.
just that, the tension causing there. And I would say, like, just notice the times when everyone feels overwhelmed. So right now we have had some newer placements, and the after school time, like 3:30 to 4:30, just feels like everything is chaos. And right now I don't have a plan for it. Like, we're just trying to work through it, but knowing, like, okay, if I get to 5 o'clock, people start to calm down. Until we figure out more of a plan of maybe these kids go to a different room to watch something while these kids come and read or whatever it is, do homework, and then we switch. So we're just trying to figure all those kinks out, but really with all kids, it's a different schedule every time. Like when we have a new house of kids or when a new placement comes, you kind of have to start from scratch again. And so I still have all my papers, but having those, I think one of my favorite ones we have, it says, what does respect look like and sound like? So saying yes, acknowledging someone is speaking to you, those kind of things that they're just sitting around and they can see it and read for themselves.
Mhm.
I like that.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
I think just being flexible. I mean, a lot of the stuff that was mentioned in the last question of like, if you're a healthy eating family, having some not so healthy options. If you're not a big screen time family, being prepared to have some screen time, to allow some screen time. And even just kind of preparing yourself. The sibling group that one of the sibling groups that we have now, they came from a rough household that used a lot of rough language. So there was an 8-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy that just were cussing like it was a big conversation because that's what they heard and that's what they were used to. So be flexible with that and teach to it and say, I know that's a word that you used at your other house, but that's not a word that we use at our house. Here's some other words you can use instead, which is really fun to hear a 4-year-old from a different culture say holy guacamole. So you can have fun with it too. But just flexibility in some of those things.
That's awesome. Yeah. Good. How about you, Terry?
Yeah, definitely the signs is a great idea. I have a whiteboard that I use kind of with expectations. So when they come in, they're like, well, we didn't go over that. Well, yeah, we did. It's on the board. So, and it's kind of straightforward. I mostly take in teenage boys. So for me, it can be about the same every time. But two, being flexible with things like the Sampsons had said, because people come from different backgrounds. So they do have different dietary needs or wants. The one thing I feel is important when transitioning to is getting as much information you can from the placement office, so you're not surprised. My first couple placements, it was, I wish I would have asked more questions. So the transition would have been easier because I didn't realize I was allowed to ask those questions. And then when they'd come up later, it's kind of too late at that point. But for transitioning, it's just ask lots of questions if you have questions, and I feel like a lot of times the placement offices will leave out information just to make it easier for them to do the placement. So with transition, if you have all the questions answered ahead of time, it makes it a lot easier once they arrive at your home.
Yeah, that's great. We do contracts in our house, like kind of like house rules or whatever, but depending on ages and stuff, and we've mostly had teenagers in our house, and partly the thing of like house rules, but sometimes it's individual and it's a lot of expectations too. But then they see it and we talk through it. And there's actually the backside is what my husband and I like, the expectations of what you can expect of us, that we will be honest, that we will be flexible, all the things. And then we all sign it. And that way, it's like we've talked about it. And like you said, when it's on the whiteboard, it's like no argument. Like we talked about this, it's up here because my oldest kid, he was an arguer, and that's how we came up with contracts, because he was always like, you never said that. I'm like, oh yeah, I did. Now it's on paper. Yeah. And I think, Terry, off of that also, of the longer that we're involved, so for all of you that are just starting to get involved, just know that the person on the other end, the caseworker, they're human also. And so it's okay for us to ask those questions and to press for some information and stuff, because they're working possibly 5 to 30 cases. And it's okay for us to advocate for ourselves and for the kids in our care, and to ask. I used to think they're the expert, I'm just along for the ride. And the longer I've been involved, I'm like, no, we're a team. We're all going to work. We're all human, and we're a team. So just know that as you guys are getting involved, you can ask those questions.
In
So
terms of asking questions, ask the kids that come into your home a lot of questions.
that's great.
Give them time to get settled and stuff like that. Don't just start peppering them right away. But especially when they first come in, because you need to sign paperwork for the caseworker and stuff like that. But it can be huge to just take a second to introduce yourself to the kids, say, hey, is there anything you need? I got to sign some paperwork over here. So their first experience is, I got to sit on a couch for 5 minutes by myself while nobody explains anything, and they go sign papers. But just including them as early and often as you can in stuff like that, and asking what they like, and foods and decorations and movies and stuff like that.
Great. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So this one for Tiffany from the child welfare side, and then for Terry as a foster parent. How can you be respectful yet a strong advocate when facing challenging things that come your way within the child welfare system and experience?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Well, as Tracy just mentioned, they have a lot on their plate. And just knowing that, I know in South Dakota, I don't know the number, but it is high, like over 30 cases per worker. And so they're going nonstop. And but anybody who's listening from South Dakota, we are blessed with the workers we have. All the ones I worked with are so good, and they'll get back to you right away by email or text. And just keep an open line of communication. I just got a new placement just recently, and just every time I have a question, because there's court issues and I need to know certain things, and they'll email back right away. So just know, if you don't get a response right away, they're probably in court, or they're probably making a trip, bringing a family member somewhere, or, because they have so much on their plate. So just understanding their position is just as busy as your position, I think, is the easiest way to handle it. And then if you do have issues, just bring it up, be honest, say, hey, this is where we're missing and usually you can work it out between your caseworker and yourself. So
good, thanks. Tiffany,
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think we had a colleague say, patient perseverance, persistence, kind of that conversation of how to navigate and work with the child welfare system, and the people in it, is recognizing that there is a lot. The loads are heavy. They're human. There's a state system involved, so there's a lot of red tape and accountability and checks and balances and policies and procedures and all the things. But just being patient within that, but understanding you are an advocate, and so you do have a voice in that, and you should be heard. And so it's a gentle balance. And so it's making the phone call, following it up with an email, and you don't hear back in a certain time frame, check in, but doing it with grace and kindness of like, hey, it's been a few days, wanting to see this, or we've got a deadline. And so just doing it in a way where, like Tracy said, it's teamwork. You're on a team, and you're really advocating for the best interest of the child. And so recognizing that the person on the other end does sometimes need to be prompted and does need to be reminded. And so just doing that in a way where there's grace and kindness in that, but be persistent. And to follow it up, I always say document, and anything that you provide the state, make copies. It's just always good practice, whether it's a state organization, an agency. If you are turning in paperwork or making copies, just duplicate it and keep a file for yourself. Scan it, keep an electronic version, whatever that looks like. And then anytime you have a phone call, follow it up with an email and just say, this was my takeaway from our call today. This is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And it's just good, clean housekeeping, but it also allows everybody to kind of understand how that conversation went and then who's doing what.
Great. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to say too was, especially your first placement or first couple placements, you kind of feel like, at least I did, like I needed permission to do certain things, So then I felt maybe I was bothering the caseworker, and once you get more placements and you're more into the groove of things and how things work, really you don't have to have much, involvement with the state, so it makes their job a lot easier. It makes yours a lot easier because you're not stressing about things, those first few placements, you kind of feel like, oh, am I allowed to do this with the child, or am I allowed to do that? But once you get the hang of it, then it makes the job of the workers a lot easier and yourself a lot easier because you're not stressing about what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah, that's great. All right. In closing, before we answer the questions that people have been sending in, each of you in maybe a sentence or two, what has been the most rewarding part of an engaging in foster care? What's been the most rewarding part of engaging in foster care in 1 or 2 sentences?
I'll go first. Oh, maybe I won't go first.
For it, Terry.
All right. Well, I was able to adopt one of my more longer term foster children, so that was the most rewarding for me to now actually have an adoptive son. So
awesome.
I would say for us, we use the analogy of like when you shoot at a target, you change the trajectory by only moving a millimeter. You can change the trajectory of that greatly. And some days when it's discouraging, we say, okay, maybe they're going to hit a part of the target instead of missing the target completely by the millimeter that we did, or sometimes closer to the bullseye. And that really has been seeing whether it's families or children individually be restored or find healing or get the resources they need by just that little millimeter of an inch that we can provide for them in the big picture.
Love that. That's great. It's a good reminder for me. Cheyenne, how about you?
I think my most rewarding was I would have a sign in the kitchen that says "You belong here," and I would also post a piece of my testimony in the bedrooms and in the bathroom. So if children were able to read that, they would see that I was also once like them. So I could always tell after they would read that they would look at me differently because I have been through a lot of what they've been through. So their demeanor would just, I don't know, it's like they would become more, they would just open up and share and just feel more comfortable and wonder how I made it out. But yeah. And then something else from earlier that I forgot to mention is becoming a foster parent. Always create representation in your home. So that looks like for people of color, like having little brown girl, little brown boy books for all ages. If you don't have people of color from, Latino or African American, just start creating those type of friendships as well. Because even for me growing up, I would always want that representation, and it creates more comfort for the child to
Yeah.
invite their culture into your home.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks. Tiffany and Britt, do you have anything to say?
Well, for me, engaging in foster care has been really rewarding to see so many people that care. Oftentimes, when you experience abuse and neglect, you don't think that people are good and you don't think that people care. But engaging in this space and being able to do the work that I've done in the foster care community, I've seen so many people that care, whether they're foster parents, county workers, other foster care professionals, or just regular individuals off the street saying, I want to do something. I want to do something for these children. So it's been great.
Awesome. Good. Tiffany?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Britt said is the most rewarding part of for me is finding the yes or a person finding their yes in the narrative of foster care. And so whether that is becoming a foster parent or loving a foster parent and serving them or advocating or building your community, hosting the support group, whatever that is, it's that seed planting and we all want to be seen, loved, and known, and the value of serving families and the value of serving kids. It's moving that needle. It's changing the trajectory of their lives and enhancing their experiences for sure.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for sharing. I know that Nanette has some questions from everybody.
Yes, we got a lot of great questions. We'll try to move through as many as we can in about the next 15 minutes. We got quite a few questions about the licensing process, just looking for a little bit more detail. The first one around getting licensed to foster with the state versus a private agency and how you make those decisions and even evaluate agencies. Maybe Tiffany could kick us off.
Go for it, Tiff.
Yeah, that's a great question. I encourage you to do your homework, do your research. Every organization, the state, the system has its own unique parameters, guidelines. There are agencies out there that require different things, whether it's a faith-based, certain ages, maybe they make a therapeutic level of care for children. Maybe there's medically fragile or needy children. And so it's really going to be based on what is the best fit for you and your family and the type of care you want to provide. And so best place is just to kind of hit the ground running and do some research, ask questions of the organization, interview them just as much as they would interview you. And then that way you can kind of see, is this going to be a good fit, a good working relationship? Because ultimately you're going to be in relationship with them. You're going to be on a team with them. And so you're going to be facing challenges and joys. And so that tends to be one of those relationships you're like, can I sustain that with this worker or with this organization? I will tell you, there's no better organization or agency out there. It's just what is going to be the best fit for you and your family.
Yeah.
And
I
Tiffany,
agree.
I would just love to say that, like, asking that question of like to an agency, state, county, all the different ones, what are you going to do to support me as a foster parent? What resources are you going to provide me? What supports are you going to provide me? Because we need to keep foster parents fostering stronger and longer, and to know ahead of time what is their expectation to take care of you is so important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would just add that depending on where you live, so here in Colorado, certification is not statewide, except for when you go through private agencies. So sometimes that's a differing thing here in Colorado, and in some other parts of the country is you go through a private agency so that you can foster outside of your own county per se. Or if you're open to adoption, then going through a private agency most likely opens you up to kids from all over the state. So that would be another reason to consider.
Great.
Yeah. What else?
All right. And Brianna asked also on the licensing topic, as she's starting the process of certification, what are some tips for preparing their home for inspection?
Sure. It's going to be pretty basic in kind of the fire safety, kind of think if you have medications, if you have weapons. If you have pool on your property, a pool on your property, it's safeguarding those, but those are all going to be specific to sometimes the county that you live in and its codes, and sometimes it's actually just policy. So I would encourage you to look up policy. If you were a family that I worked with, I tell you, go look at this policy. This is DCS policy, and it will give you the guidelines so that you can hold me accountable and I can hold you accountable for those standards. But yeah, in theory and just kind of in general, medications being locked up, cleaning supplies, safeguarding outlets, weapons unloaded and locked and trigger locked, and all of those things, pools with alarms and fencing and things like that.
I
How about
also,
pets?
yeah,
Oh, and pets, yes, yes.
Pets are okay though in most cases, are there rules?
Pets
that
are
would-
okay, absolutely, absolutely. And there are different standards as well, but just recognizing that you're going to have kids in your home. So will they love and welcome children coming in, sharing toys with kids just as much as the pets? And then just cleanliness and just kind of being aware of some of those things as well, and vaccines.
I was gonna say, what was I gonna say? Oh, that I usually tell people the first time they come over, you're not gonna have it perfect, and be okay with that. Like, I've had people that are like, I want to have it perfect the first time, and I'm like, they're gonna find something most likely. So don't sweat it, like do the work. But they usually have a checklist too of all the things to do, and depending on the age you're having come into your home. So yeah.
Yeah, and they'll
All
give
right.
you time to prepare.
Good point. So we got a couple of people who asked about respite care. We didn't touch on that specifically tonight, but can you talk about that as, is it possible to just be a respite foster parent? And what would be some different considerations when you're in that role from the child's point of view? How do foster kids typically respond? How can they make sure that they're welcoming for something so short term?
I can kind of share on the child welfare side, and so I know Cheyenne's received respite providers. So every organization and agency and state is different. It's kind of redundant in what we say. But respite usually has a time period on it, and it's typically because maybe another home is a better fit, but they needed time to prepare, or maybe there's a transition period for another child to exit, whatever that case may look like. But it's just an understanding that an agreement between the organization or agency saying for the weekend, for a week. But again, it's that understanding that you're going to provide that safe space for a period of time. When you are a respite home, it typically means though that you are licensed just like a foster home. So you still have the same standards, same training, same ongoing training and ongoing compliance and monitoring. So typically those requirements don't change or aren't they're the same. But again, it's just a shorter time period.
And then sometimes foster parents providing respite for each other. So depending on what kind of placement situation you have, it might be that a child in your house goes to somebody else's house for a weekend, or you have a trip that you need to go to and they can't come with you, or something like that. And so, and I think, like Tiffany mentioned, across the board, it's different everywhere as far as what, if you can get certified to do respite, or if you have to be a foster parent and then provide respite. It's just different everywhere. In the state of Colorado, they actually changed some legislation to where if I'm in the life of a family that's fostering, I can provide care up to a certain amount of hours, like it's like 72 hours without any certification. So I could provide respite care if I'm in the life of that family, but not as, and they have to like okay it, of course. But so you have to kind of look and see where you're at and what.
Something similar where there's a certain period of time that a friend or close, I don't know, they can watch the kids before it has to be a licensed respite provider. But we've kind of been on both sides of respite. We've done respite for other foster parents and had our kids in respite, and it can be challenging, and it can be really confusing for the kids because they, especially if they haven't been in foster care that long, So the sibling group that we have, we had only had them for about 2 weeks before we had a vacation that was planned for over a year that we had to send them to a respite home. And so that was really confusing for them because they weren't sure if they were going to be, that was their new family or if we were coming in that kind of anxiety and stuff. So we were just very sure to check in frequently, to tell them they were only going to be there for a while. My wife wrote little notes for them every day so that they could kind of remember us and just checking in like that. And when you have a respite child, just again, it's that same conversation of even if they feel like every kid has more fun at somebody else's house. But even if they feel like they don't want to leave, they don't want to go back, like just having that conversation, that kind of constant, like, no, you're going to go back. They're going to come back. They're going to come back. That repetition can be really important.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. Jonathan asked about being able to specify an age range for a child. And I heard Terry and Cheyenne both speak to the fact that you had specific age groups that you felt called to. So Jonathan's son is 6 and they're hoping to have him remain the oldest kid. So can you speak to that specifically? And then just generally, what is the ability to specify a certain demographic age group that you feel called to foster?
I will answer this one. So I would say that there's 2 sides, like obviously be open because like in Tracy's case, I mean like that it doesn't always work that way, but also it's okay to go in with a set this is what we need for our kids or for our family or for the season that we're in right now. And we have done that where we only took under 2 because of, I mean, talking to our adopted boys, they said, can we just do little kids and that one's our age? And so that we wanted to respect that. And so knowing that ahead of time was helpful. When you want to do sibling groups, you kind of give a bigger range. I think that sometimes it's helpful to just have a set, because DSS sometimes will push you on that and say, well, can you open it to this age? Or what if you reach by this age? It's okay to have a set. Don't let them bully you into thinking different. Like, you know what's best for your family and for the kids in your home already. And so saying, I think that's a really good reason, because it's really quick to say, we don't want to go over we want our oldest to be the oldest. And that's okay.
Yeah.
There is a space for that, whether it's respite or whether it might take you longer to get a placement. If it's a very small age range, if you are really wanting kids in your home right away, you open it up to all ages.
Yeah.
That's the fastest placement.
Yeah.
Now,
I think, oh, go ahead, John.
in South Carolina, every foster care license, you're licensed for 0 to 18, and then it has a preference. So if your preference is 0 to 6, and they call and say, hey, we have an 8-year-old, or there's a 5-year-old, but they have a 10-year-old sister, then you're still licensed and you don't have to amend that.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. I think on that too is just keeping in mind that I've had friends that have fostered and they're like, I feel like such a monster if I say no when they call for a placement, and to realize that if it's outside of what you feel like you're capable of that age range or gender or timing, that you don't want a kid to have to move again. So stick to what you have decided is best, because that's what's best for that kid too. Otherwise, I think that when people just say these very open yeses, that's sometimes when kids end up having to move. So just know, and that the county or state wants you to be successful also. And so that placement, that child stays in your home. So knowing what works, and that sometimes after you've fostered for a while, you're like, okay, we know what we're doing a little bit now, and we can open up a little bit or whatever it might be. But yes, you can usually be very specific on what works. And then just knowing each time you get a call, maybe it's a little different than it was last school year or whatever, that what works for you.
Yeah, I'm very specific. I tell them 16 to 18 teenage boys who are going to be aging out. And so I'm very particular. Now I have one that came yesterday, and he's 12, but he'll be only with me for a few weeks. So but yeah, I get texts every week and I always give the same response. No, teenage boys who are aging out. There's plenty of them that need a home. So it's not like I'll be lacking someone in my home. So.
Yeah. That's cool.
I think it's
What-
important to realize that too, foster care, the intention is the goal is reunification. And so recognizing that your role is temporary, and it is to provide the best space for this child during the time and the season that they're in care, with hopes and working with both parents and the hopes of reunification happening. And so, like Tracy said, to say yes, and then require another move, or it doesn't work out. And there are cases where that happens because there's something that we didn't know, and that's okay. That's okay. We can make that transition the best transition when we do have to say no in that moment, or disrupt. But a no for your family is okay, because ultimately you're recognizing that it may not be a good fit, and it's ultimately about the best interest of the child, but recognizing that the intention is reunification, and we are wanting to meet a need. And so you may sit with no calls for a little bit. Or I always challenge foster parents, like, I understand your no is, or your preferences are there, but let's talk. Why is that? What can I do to better support you or serve you to really meet the need of the kids that we have in care? And it might be the teens, or it might be just again reinforcing that, okay, it's a no right now, but can we stretch you to partner with another mentor family who is starting with teens, and maybe we can give you some supports, and you can say yes because you have that support system, or you have somebody that can walk you through some of those hard moments.
Nanette, what else?
Yeah, that's a great lead in. Charlotta had a great question on that topic, which is how do you find or get engaged with a RAP team until you're ready to foster? And you kind of mentioned that too as a great way to start to lean in and learn about foster care.
Yeah, so I would just say, if you don't have RAP, or if that's not a familiar language for the state that you're in, you can go to resources on America's Kids Belong's website. Tennessee Kids Belong also, and some of our other state chapters have those resources. But ultimately, it's about, if you want to say yes, rally 5 or 6 other people in your community that will say yes with you, and then reach out to your state agency, or a private organization or agency, and just say, hey, I've got 6 people, or I've got this group that wants to really connect with a foster family. Is there a way that we can provide meals? Is there a way that we can be extra hands? And can we mow somebody's yard? Can we send words of encouragement? And so I always just say, like, you don't necessarily have to have that organization or somebody leading the ship. You can do it. So again, just ask the questions, sign up on a Facebook group for foster parents, and say, anybody in my area that I can love on, and start there. But obviously, I would encourage you, if you're in one of our states, reach out to our resources there, but definitely check out America's Kids Belong's resources.
Awesome. And I'll mention too, our next webinar is September 21st at 7:30, and we're going to be talking about how to thrive as a foster parent. So we'll talk a lot more about RAP and what that looks like hands-on, and what that experience means, and how important it is to people who are providing foster care. So I think we have time for one more question, and there were so many good questions. So thank you to everybody who submitted, but we had a couple of people ask about foster adopt. And you just mentioned about the goal of foster care being reunification. When is that not the case? And can you talk a little bit about what foster adopt looks like?
Sure. Every state is a little bit different. Tennessee is actually a foster to adopt state. So in order to adopt, you do have to foster for a period of time for children that are in care. And so as far as adoption goes, there's a home study required. There is training. There are different systems in place for that. as far as whatever state that you're in. So my advice is to research, see what's required of your state, and then follow suit. And best practice is, again, to ask questions of those adoption agencies, of those organizations that do foster to adopt. What does that look like timeline wise? I would love to say this is how long it would take. That's just not I'm not able to answer that question. Every case is very unique. Every case, there's ultimately a judge that makes decisions in a court decision. And so sit tight, but again, recognizing that when you step into foster care, it is with that goal of reunification. They're going to exhaust all efforts to really ensure that reunification can happen, whether that is with the caregiver that the child was removed from, or a family member, kinship. I think we've used that language. So kinship can be a relative. It also can be a non-relative, somebody that's in their life, like a coach, a family friend, a neighbor. And so the reason for those kinship connections is because there's a cultural piece, there's a connection piece that will help the healing, the trauma, the mitigate some of that trauma that happens at removal. And so they are looking for those relationships and those connections. And then from there, ultimately determine when is that the permanency plan or the plan to reunify or go back to a family member or kinship connection can no longer happen, and then proceeds through an adoption.
But in South Carolina, where we are, this is not a foster to adopt state. So there's no foster to adopt process. I think their rationale is they want foster parents who are going to promote reunification. They don't want foster parents who are getting into it who will not fight for reunification because they're interested in adoption. So it is a different process than fostering here in South Carolina. And again, state to state is so different, but that's just a different perspective from our state.
Yeah. I think also to know, I mean, part of Tiffany touched on this a bit, but when we are, I'm sorry, I'm echoing all of a sudden. The kids that we share the videos of, so some kids that are waiting in foster care to be adopted, that typically you can be certified through a private agency or through the state or county, and then inquire about that kid. And I always encourage people, if you're all open to that, go ahead and get certified, because sometimes by the time you've gone through that process, that kid has already been matched with somebody else. So if you're just even thinking maybe I'd be open to that, then go ahead and start that process. That's what my family did. We met a kid through one of the I Belong Project videos, and we inquired and got certified. So it is something that across the country it happens, where kids are waiting in foster care, that they've maybe been in foster care for multiple years and they need to be adopted, that parental rights have been terminated, and they're sitting in that in-between space just bouncing around in foster care. So we definitely want to see more families step up, and I would just encourage you to start the process. Don't wait till you see a kid that you're like, oh, I mean, that's what happened to us, but sometimes it wouldn't work out. Like we'll start inquiring, and so go ahead and start dipping your toes in the water and getting certified.
Terry, you've been on both sides of that equation. Wondered if you had any closing thoughts on the foster care and adoption side.
Mine was a little bit different. I adopted when my foster son turned 18. So it was a little different situation, but and for me, like I said, I do kids who are about to age out, so they're not working on reunification process at all at that point. So for me, it's a little bit different. And yeah, so I'm not sure. There's probably not a lot of people, but being a single foster dad, for me, that's the rewarding part of it, is the being able to have that connection for when they do age out, because then they can come back to me for resources. I don't have another the family to focus on. I can solely focus on the children in my home, and the ones who have left the home, they still have a rock to go to. So I guess I don't have a great answer on the adoption aspect in South Dakota, but it worked out well for me, and I'm looking forward to potentially doing it several more times if possible. So
Cool.
I think you bring a good point of that. One, there are children available and eligible for adoption every day right now at this moment. And so to be prepared, so that if you have that connection or if you see that voice, you can be ready. Many our inquiries, the inquiries that come through, we want you to be home study ready. So if you can do that now, start. And then just the value of belonging. You mentioned even after 18, adoption can occur. There's such value and just desire for our youth to belong. And that's even us as adults, we want to belong. And so it's not just, 0 to 17, 0 to 18, it's long after that. So yeah, just other opportunities.
Great point. Well, great discussion tonight. Thank you. I want to say thank you to all the panelists on behalf of everybody that's here. Thank you to all of you who took time to join us and learn and listen. We will be sending an email to you tomorrow, and we have a follow-up survey that we would just love to get your feedback of what you thought of tonight's program and also what else you'd like to see in the future. We'd love to continue to offer these types of programs. We want to close tonight by sharing a special video with you that is sort of a trailer of our upcoming programs, and just share some of the voices you've seen here tonight and some others as well that may be less familiar to you, but are also part of this program. And so you're welcome to stand and watch that, or we'll send you a link as well on YouTube. But thank you again for being with us.
Thank you all.
It might shock you to know that there are over 400,000 kids in the U.S. foster care system, and only about 50% of the foster families needed to care for them. A good foster family is a place of stability in times of so much uncertainty.
The times of uncertainty, the wondering, like what's going to happen next, it literally affects everything.
Without healthy adults present and providing the stable footing to begin healing, many kids in foster care lose their footing and eventually fall hard into things like trafficking, addiction, homelessness, teen pregnancy, and incarceration.
The external and the internal safety is going to be crucially important for that child to truly experience healing, because what they've known wasn't safe. And over and over and over again, we as the community, and yes, within the home, both help that child learn you can find safety here.
It's a foothold. It is a place where healing from trauma can begin to happen when kids are given love and compassion and being a safe place to process feelings and emotions.
So I love emphasizing, if you are the community, whatever that looks like in your volunteer role or paid role or teacher or professional role within that child's life, you absolutely play an important role.
For biological parents dedicated to getting their kids back, a foster family provides the gift of loving their child and giving them the space and time they need to work on themselves and find wholeness and healing so their family can be restored.
They were always polite. I felt like they didn't judge us. And I felt like they supported us trying to get Rourke back. They made all the difference.
There's a lot of kids out there that could use help because their parents can't. And so if there's parents that can, I challenge them to raise themselves up to that expectation and do that.
What I could have really used as a teenager was just somebody to kind of stand in the gap for me and help me navigate those relationships and help me navigate my feelings when I was experiencing all of that.
What makes a good foster parent is that person in their corner willing to do all of the things for them and advocate for them, but also bring them along with that advocacy.
So if you're going to go down this path and actually go through the training, the certifications, do so with the whole intent in your heart and in your mind that you're doing this because you truly care about taking care of these kids and having an open mind, open heart, open home. Just go in it with the intentions that you're going to, be there for them no matter what.
Being good foster parents and ultimately a good foster family is not rocket science, but it is rocket fuel. And your involvement can change the future trajectory of the lives of the kids in your care. And beyond that, can have generational and lasting impacts on the families that they represent.
They're worth all the work that they put into themselves. They're worth all the work that others put into them for a child or youth in foster care, that they're worthy of that belonging. They're worthy of having a family that will care for them and having a family that will love them, whether that's the family that they were born into or a different family or a little combination of both. They're worth it.